Welcome to episode 25 of Rubbish Talk with myself, Alistair Meldrum.
And myself, Jane Bond.
Yeah, you're back again, Jane. You're back.
Well, do you know what? I just, I come and go. It's good that Alicia gets to do all the chatting as well. She's quite good at chat. I was telling my friends that I'm a professional chatter now.
There you go.
So what have we been looking at in the news then? I've got something here. What's quite interesting. PepsiCo sued by New York State for plastic pollution along the Buffalo River. What just amazing that actually there's a picture in the, we'll put the link on the Rubbish Talk website. There's a picture of all these plastic bottles. It's quite interesting. I think they can actually sue PepsiCo because the majority of the bottles are theirs. And it's saying it's the single largest identifiable contributor to the problem. Do you find it quite interesting because there's lots of these big companies are saying, oh yeah, we're doing this, we're doing that, and they were also talking about Coca-Cola, Nestle accused of misleading eco claims because they've claimed that their plastic bottles are 100% recyclable or recycled. And they're actually saying, well, are they really? Let's have a look.
In reality, half of them are in the river or on the side of the street.
And it's all greenwash, isn't it?
I think it's fascinating that if some of these cases do go through, if organisations like PepsiCo, Coca-Cola put their power behind trying to change behaviours and actually stop littering and stuff like that, I think it'd be quite a massive change, but whether that'll ever happen and whether it'll ever happen over here. But interesting enough, Laura Young, our previous guest and vape campaigner, she posted up on LinkedIn about Elf Bar has been found guilty, if you like, of misleading advertising. They were trying to claim that their vapes were easily recyclable, and the judgment was against them basically because the vapes aren't particularly easily recyclable, and they weren't also providing a facility for actually taking these back. So an interesting judgment there.
Yeah, I've got something else about, again, call for transparency over biodegradable advertising campaigns. What's biodegradable, what's composting, what does it mean? So it says here it's by the Advertising Standards Authority, has said the public can be left frustrated over unclear claims made about biodegradable or compostable products, which is totally true, isn't it? I mean, what does it mean by compostable and biodegradable? I mean, does compostable mean you can put it in a compost bin and it'll disappear? But it's saying that that's not necessarily the case because they're being identified as biodegradable when it could take up to tens of years to do that biodegrading bit. So yeah, I mean, it's great that we're getting all these new and all these products and everything, but let's kind of be honest about them, I think, is the feeling.
I did my usual bin check just the other day when I was taking stuff out of the bin, and in my bin there is I think it's a biodegradable package for a cake or something. I think it's biodegradable, but I do have this dilemma as to which bin it should be going in. Should it be going in my garden bin as compost? I think it's paper based, so could it go in my paper collection? And I have this dilemma as to whether, or should it go in my residual bin? And I've still not quite decided, and there's no markings on it. So as a waste professional, I'm struggling to work out which out of the three bins it goes into. You do wonder how the general public are going to manage it.
Yeah, it's like those coffee pods. The coffee pods say they're, I don't know, but they're biodegradable or compostable. You put them in your composting bin, but I'm not entirely convinced on that either.
This is almost going on to tea bags, Jane. The tea bags with the plastic bag inside. But we'll not go there. We've been there before.
The amount of tea I drink, it's all in the compost bin.
Anyway, the one I spotted at the weekend was a thing called, I'm not quite sure how to pronounce it, Spogomai World Cup. So the Spogomai World Cup was on, and for some reason I put the TV on, and it was the British team actually won this competition. And it's basically they call it a trash pickup competition. So I'm not quite sure how it works. I think they've got to clear an area as quickly as possible of litter. I think they get points for how many bits to collect, how many bits they miss, and so on. So if anybody's interested, there is actually a website about it all, and the World Championships were there just recently in Japan. Now, I'm not sure it's a great way. Well, it's maybe good because it puts a target on litter, but should we really be encouraging people to drop litter just so we can have a competition to pick it back up?
Yeah, fair enough. That's a new one on me.
Absolutely. So now we know. We've talked about this a few times recently. A wee update on the newsletter, Jen?
Yeah, well, the newsletters have been going out. I think about 3 or 4 have gone out already. So if you're not getting it, if you haven't seen it, then you need to sign up on the Rubbish Talk website, and there should be a button to press that will, make it easy for you to do that. So yeah, just get it. It's interesting.
I think we're almost up to date, and then hopefully we're going to get the newsletters out at the same time as the podcast going forward. So as Jane said, if you're not on the list, if you're not getting it, so on, obviously check your spam and so on, because quite often it ends up there. But if you do want to be included, go on to rubbishtalk.co.uk, put your email address in, and we'll make sure we get you added onto the list. And then, as we've been trailing for the last few podcasts, we're delighted to announce we're going to be doing, but Jane's disappointed in this. I'm going to be doing a Rubbish Talk live at the Chartered Institute of Waste Management Christmas lunch. So before the Christmas lunch, before the free bar starts, they always have some presentations. So we have been invited to try and do a live version. We are hoping to have the technology to record it. We were talking about trying to stream it live, but we've decided that's far too complicated for a Christmas lunch day. But hopefully, fingers crossed, we're going to be able to record it, and we will get it edited up, and we will share it out as a podcast. So if you're not going to the lunch, we'll hopefully have that recording available. If you are coming along to the CIWM Christmas lunch, and I know some of our listeners will be, by all means turn up early and you can listen to a live version. Hopefully, fingers crossed, fingers and toes crossed. And then there are other updates. It's not really an Albion update, but Switch, we mentioned Switch quite a lot. So Switch is a not-for-profit organisation that tries to promote health and safety and education, training, competence within the waste and resources sector. It is a not-for-profit. We had our AGM last week down in Dumfries. It was well attended, very positive, lots of good engagement from everybody there. And I think it's just really to highlight there's loads of great resource on the Switch website. So if you are involved in the waste sector and you are involved in health and safety, training, education and so on, have a look at some of the resources out there. And if you're not signed up to them, then again, there's a sign up at the bottom of the website, and that's switchforum.org.uk. So I think that's my plug over, I think, for the week. So the only other little bit of news we spotted was a previous guest, episode 13, Robin Stevenson, who worked with Hamilton Waste. The big news in Scotland is Hamilton Waste has sold out to Biffa. So Biffa is the new owner of Hamilton Waste. So quite a big change for Robin and the owners of Hamilton Waste. So good luck to them. This week we interviewed, myself and Alicia interviewed. We dropped Jane again, unfortunately.
Yeah, I just get picked up and dropped whenever. Alicia
got the job of interviewing because it was actually one of Alicia's contacts. She'd actually made contact with Alex, so we thought it was only fair that she did the interview. So Alec Robinson works for an organisation called Hubbub, and they're a not-for-profit, and what they're trying to do is inspire action which is good for the environment. So that's all for us just now. I'll pass you over.
So today we have Alex Robinson from Hubbub. Hi Alex, how are you this morning?
Hi Alicia, I'm well, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. It's lovely to have you on. Thank you for joining us on Rubbish Talk. So I'm going to kick off with some questions today. We're going to find out a little bit about your career and your industry and the company that you work for. So first, I would just like to ask you to tell me a little bit about the organisation that you work for and some background information about them.
Absolutely. So I'm the CEO of Hubbub, and Hubbub's an environmental charity that's here to inspire action that's good for the environment and for everyone. And we were founded about 10 years ago to run positive and creative campaigns that meet people where they're at and make environmental action appealing to a much wider, more mainstream audience. So that's what we've been doing for the last 10 years or so.
Yeah, that sounds really exciting. I've been keeping up with a lot of your campaigns via social media, and they all seem very interesting. So hopefully later on I'll get you to tell us a little bit about some of the things you're working on just now. Could you tell our listeners a little bit about your role specifically? What does day-to-day kind of look like for you?
Well, so as the CEO, I'm responsible for everything across the organisation. So it's a mixture for me often of setting the direction for the organisation, making sure that we have a really positive, creative, productive culture in the organisation, because that is so important for delivering the work we're doing, making sure we're working on the right things. Of course, I also look after the kind of business and finance and operational and like the boring but super important stuff. I'm the public face of the organisation to some extent, although that's shared across many of us at Hubbub as well. So I get to do things like this in my day-to-day, which is a bonus. And then I think the last thing is that I'm really the person who the board at Hubbub, they delegate their authority to. So in a charity, it's the trustees that hold the full responsibility for the charity. So I'm kind of their representative. So I also work with them to make sure that we're doing what we're set out to do.
You mentioned there, Alec, that you try and do the work that's important. How big a challenge is that to actually work out what the priorities and the important things are at the moment in the environmental space? It's quite a sort of challenging area in some ways.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the way we try to think about it is think about our strengths as an organization. So we're particularly good at behavior change because we're focused on inspiring people to take action, and communications and getting people to look in a new way at an old topic. And we're really, really good at also connecting large organizations, government and so on with grassroots communities with action on the ground. So we look for spaces where we think there's significant impact to be had, but also there's not other people doing the work in the way that we might be able to do it. So there's a gap for us to take action, because what you don't want to do, especially I think in the charitable space, is just replicate the work of another organization. We would rather support and amplify the organizations that are doing great work already. So we try and pick things where we think that there's much more to do. So, and we might talk about this later on, but for example, we're looking at reusable food and drink packaging and how we can take that to scale. For example, we're looking at sustainable diets, so how to inspire people to eat more plants, less meat, in a way that is positive, constructive, pragmatic, and so on. So we look for these sweet spots where we think there's a lot of impact, there's a gap, and we're well placed to do it.
Perfect, thank you. Can you tell me how you got into this field? How did you?
I mean, by accident, a little bit. So my
It's
background
a common theme.
Yeah, my background in the music industry, that was my obsession as a kid and a teenager. I only really ever wanted to work in and around music, and I left university and went and worked in a distributor. So I was selling records to record shops, and I worked my way through. I ended up running my own business representing American record labels in Europe. So totally different world. I was touring festivals around Europe, and I wouldn't say it was glamorous, but there were moments for sure. And I had just a bit of a moment in my early 30s where I realized I just didn't want to keep doing it forever. I kind of reached a point where I felt I'd done the bits that I wanted to do, and I couldn't see it as a long-term solution in it. And I wanted to switch to purpose-led business and sustainability somehow, and didn't know how to do it. And I ended up doing this year-long program called On Purpose, which helps people transition from generally things like traditional careers like accountancy or civil service, teaching, things like that, into social enterprise. And so I did this year-long program. It was really fantastic. And at the end of it, I was looking for jobs, and Hubbub, where I work now, had a social enterprise, still do, and it invented something called the ballot bin. And now the ballot bin is a cigarette ashtray. It goes on the street. If you haven't seen one, it's bright yellow. It has a glass front with two columns and a question at the top with two options. So the first one famously said, who's the best footballer in the world, Ronaldo or Messi? We preloaded the Ronaldo side to kind of annoy people at that time. And and
skewing the results already.
that wasn't a scientific experiment. That it was just to see if people would use it. So Hubbub, this is before my time, but Hubbub invented this product and had lots of demand for it, but struggled to figure out how to commercialize it. And so they put an advert out for someone to manufacture, distribute, market this product around Europe. And so I looked at this advert and thought, well, I've been manufacturing records and CDs and merchandise. I've been creating distribution relationships all around Europe and doing marketing for a decade. Like, this is my area of expertise. It's just I did music and not behavior change ashtrays. And I don't know about your subject matter. So it was just a perfect match that I could go in and work on this waste management project without the sector skills, and they got someone overqualified who didn't understand the sector, and we just figured it out. So, and I just had a great time. And I'm still there 7 years later in a different role, and I've had few different roles over the period. But like lots of people you speak to, I'm sure I didn't expect to find myself talking about waste management much, and I didn't have an interest in it, but it's an endlessly fascinating topic, and so relevant to all of us. So yeah, it's been a good ride.
Yeah, brilliant. No, I think I first noticed you on LinkedIn actually with I don't think it was ashtrays. I think it was a litter bin. With I can't remember what.
We have a new big. It's called the Big Ballot Bin, and it's a giant solar powered version of the cigarette ashtray, which caused a real commotion on the streets. We dropped it as a trial this year, but it was right during the Barbie and Oppenheimer moment.
Yeah, that's
probably the one I saw. Actually.
It was such luck for us that we then could do a Barbie and Oppenheimer bin at that moment, and it just went viral. Now we're figuring out how to make that at scale. That's one of the exciting projects we've got going at the moment, but that was a fantastic one.
You mentioned that on purpose. I'd never heard of that before. Actually, I've actually I apologise. I'm googling here as we speak, and it looks quite interesting. We'll maybe share the link to that. Actually,
please.
It's interesting organisation by the sound of it, because I used to do quite a lot of work for the not-for-profit sector, and we've talked in show before. I'm involved with an organisation called Switch, which is a charity in Scotland, and it is quite challenging charity work and not-for-profit work in terms of how you operate and how you get staff involved. Yeah, we'll share that link. So you're very definitely in the camp of not meaning to join the waste sector, but you're now firmly ensconced. In terms of your previous career and projects, any sort of favourite projects that stand out in terms of what you've done?
There's so many. I mean, for me, really, I got to work for many years with a producer called Madlib, which you probably haven't heard of, but it was my hero. And so I spent years working with someone and became friends with someone who I'd been basically the biggest teenage fanboy of. So that's always going to be special. I think in terms of like the industry career, I had lots of good moments, but I worked on a project. You might remember a song called "I Need a Dollar" by Aloe Black. Does that ring a bell?
Yeah.
So we took that from a demo. It didn't do much in America, but it just took off in Europe, and I was managing that whole process on my own, and it just went absolutely bananas in quite a short period. And we had, at one point, I just had a kind of cupboard full of gold records, because in Germany and in France and in the Netherlands and all around Europe and Australia, and it was just really kicking off. I think it got to number 2 in the UK, or number 3 in the UK as well. And we were just an organisation that was not set up to have a hit record. We were releasing weird music, and so just to have this accidental smash hit and then try and make the most of it, it was just a whirlwind year. And I learned so much in that period, and it was so nice having spent basically my whole career being kind of a big fish in a tiny pond, having a record that actually people knew about, and I could go to a party and people would be like, "Oh yeah, I know that song," for the first time in a long time. That was really nice, and that was that was something I'm very proud of, and had a lot of fun trying to make that happen.
Brilliant. We've got to remind Alicia what a record and a CD is, but we'll
Yeah.
we'll skip over that bit.
And when
Alistair, I actually
when I
have
say-
a record player.
Do you know, when I say, because I work with all my partners are American, so when I say record, I really just mean a song or an album. They just say record as a catch-all for everything.
And what about with Hubbub? Any special moments or any disasters? Any ones with which if you wish to share?
There's always, I mean, maybe not disasters, but we're always making mistakes, because part of our ethos at Hubbub is to try out new things. And if you try out new things, then they're not all going to work, right? So one of my favorites, which I think covers both, is we have a project called Plastic Fishing in London. I don't know if you've seen this, but we built the world's first recycled plastic boats, or we believe they're the world's first. Part of the reason we're fairly confident in this is that it was only after we'd committed to make them that we discovered that recycled plastic doesn't float. So this is quite a challenge when you're making boats. So this is a project where we took plastic, mainly recovered plastic from waterways where we could. We turned it into plaswood, like planks of plastic wood, and then this maverick boat builder who's he built a barge for the Queen, he built a boat for James Bond, all kinds of things. He committed to trying to make these plastic punts, and he managed it. And now we take people out fishing for plastic in Canary Wharf, so the kind of business district in London, where people can go around all of the skyscrapers, and they're fishing out the type of packaging that they have in their lunchboxes, basically plastic bottles, all the stuff that floats, crisp packets, and so on. And so we're teaching people about the impact of the packaging that we interact with on a daily level, and our own habits, and the impact on the waterways, not thousands of miles away, but here in our, on our own shores and in our own waterways. And we're doing it in like a really fun, creative way that literally people are getting their hands dirty and kind of connecting with the issue. And I just think it's such a powerful, and we do it as a corporate volunteering exercise, so it also makes a profit that we can then use for our charity to do other work. So I think it's just a beautiful example of how you can take a creative approach to a problem, do something new, have an impact, and it just is really, it's self-sustaining as well. So I love that one.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think when you're doing projects like that and they are as creative, it definitely helps to stick in people's minds and help them to make that change, rather than just feeding stuff out to them when you're doing something as kind of something that you remember as much as that. It definitely sticks in your mind and helps you to make that change.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's seeing it up close and personal.
Yeah.
And being in a new environment out of your day-to-day is powerful for sure. Yeah,
that sounds brilliant.
I do like the idea of the plastic boats that don't float.
Yeah. Sometimes you just got to commit, and then we found a way. So that's why we say actually it's like a 99% recycled plastic boat, because there's some very buoyant foam.
Yeah. To make it so.
Right.
Out of interest, you touched on the sort of corporate days, and that's how you sort of make that self-financing, if you like. As a charity, where does your revenue come from? Is it grants, or is it you get contracted to do work for local authorities, for example, or what is your mix of sort of funding you get?
So we have a mixed model. So we have a range of grants from people like the National Lottery and some of the larger charitable funders, and we do a lot of work with business partners, and often it's the organizations that you interact with day to day, because they're the ones who are also engaging with the same kind of audience. So we work with Virgin Media O2, we work with Starbucks, we work with Dunelm, like retailers, all kinds of the organizations that you deal with day to day. And we do have a little bit of money that comes from statutory sources, local authorities, and so on, but much less than we used to. And what we don't do is we don't ask the public for any money, because we see our role as inspiring the public to take action, and you can't do that or it's more difficult to do that if you're also asking them to give you money.
I'm going to ask a question that might be way out with the remit of what you're doing, but as a waste sector, we've got the extended producer responsibility coming out, and that's going to need producers of packaging effectively to take a much bigger involvement, if you like, in terms of how that material is recycled. Are you seeing that as a potential opportunity to get involved with these larger organizations?
Do you mean large organizations in the waste sector, or the producers of the packaging?
The producers of the packaging.
I mean, we already work with, if not the manufacturers of the packaging, although sometimes, with FMCG brands, fast-moving consumer goods brands, especially on things like on-street recycling projects. So you might have seen we have something called In the Loop, which is started off in Leeds and is now all around the UK, and it's a project we're actually funding councils to do on-street recycling that works, and that project has always been funded by the companies that make the packaging that needs to be recycled. So to begin with, it was a large coalition of all the people you might expect, McDonald's, Coca-Cola, Greggs, people like that. And then more recently, we've had a grant fund available for councils who want to introduce on-street recycling, which McDonald's have paid for. So we're already somewhat involved. I'm very supportive of extended producer responsibility. I think it's really important that the people producing the packaging have a responsibility for its end of life and are incentivized to be thinking about that. And I really hope it will drive both innovation in packaging and get people shifting their attention and resources much more to looking at more circular models, because that's going to be, in the end, the solution that is best for the environment, and hopefully people can find great economic ways to make it work as well, even if we do need perhaps more and more legislation just to make sure those incentives are aligned.
You mentioned there getting on the street recycling working. How do you do that? The number of times you see recycling bins in a station and it's like, eeny, miny, mo, which bin am I going to put this coffee cup into? And you see, and I've done it. I've stood with 3 or 4 people and, right, where are you going to put your coffee cup? And okay, we shouldn't have bought a coffee cup, but we did. And they're like, they all choose a different bin. And it's, how do we overcome that? How do we change that and make it so it's just automatic what people do?
Yeah, so we know that people spend, you're talking about an instance where everyone's standing there thinking about what to do with their waste, which happens occasionally, maybe more for us who care about this stuff. We know from research that people spend less than a second just thinking about this. They put things in. People have got other pressing matters to think about in their daily lives. So it's a science and an art to making it work. The science is largely to do with bin placement, and we've developed data-led ways of working out where to put bins that will be most effective, because more bins isn't always the answer. In fact, it cannot always be helpful. And we've done some really interesting projects with a company called Ellipsis, who use drones with machine learning capabilities to map litter before and after intervention. So they can just do incredibly accurate litter mapping and test the impact of different interventions. It can really help you make sure you put bins in the right place. So
you almost need to say that again, Alex. So a company using drones, start again from the.
So we partner with an organisation. They're called Ellipsis Earth. They have drones that they have trained, or they have software that they have trained to recognise pretty much all kinds of waste, down to the most minute detail. They can recognise brands of cigarette from like the tiny bit that's left above the filter and things like that, like tiny scraps. So they can do flyovers where they produce a incredibly accurate map of all of the litter in a whole neighborhood, and then they can repeat that process after you do something, and it's much faster but mainly much more accurate than having humans do it, for a variety of reasons. So they've helped us really develop the robustness of those types of interventions. You can't do it everywhere, and of course it's not cheap at the moment. But even before we were working with them, we were making really significant improvements in cities and towns on street recycling, and so placement is part of it. There's also some important principles that include things like always put your recycling bin next to a general waste bin, for example. It sounds simple, but people don't do it, and you know what, people on the street are going to use the nearest
a bin's a bin.
Bin's a bin, right? So and then there's a lot that you can do to improve the salience of the bins that you put out. So we make them bright yellow typically. Again, it's not rocket science, but it works. We also signpost. It's about focusing on what's important. So it depends on the location, but we'll typically put on really big on the front of a bin on the street the most common things that you want on there. So it might just be bottles and cans, for example, because if you can collect bottles and cans, you're getting the vast majority of the recycling materials with value that are disposed of on the street. No one wants to read a list of 35 different things you can put in that bin and having dozens and dozens of logos, because it just ends up being confusing. So focus on what's important, keep it really simple, make it obvious. You can change the shape of the aperture and so on. The coffee cup example that you named is tricky because, as you will know, and maybe some of your listeners will know, they can't. It's one of the ones that no one knows what to do with, because you think it's paper, but it can't be recycled in a typical recycling stream. Can be recycled in a specialist recycling stream, so you do get specialist bins for that. And if you do that, you need to make it really obvious that it's for that and that only, and make it really easy for people to deal with the cup and the lid and the liquid and so on. So we found ways of doing that as well, but it's not easy, and really the solution for that is trying to shift people as much as possible to their own cups or to reusable cups. But it's a big challenge. So there's a lot that could be done. We publish not just our impact reports, but guides on how to do this stuff, because we're trying to accelerate the shift to everyone doing this effectively. It's not just about us doing it. So if your listeners are interested, I would recommend looking up In the Loop. If you type In the Loop and Hubbub into your search engine, you'll come up with a website that has lots of materials about how to do this, and we're really happy to answer people's questions and help them make it work.
We're always quite happy, Alec, to share links that you think are relevant as well. So we do or at least do some show notes, and
we'll put it in the newsletter as well.
Started putting it out as a newsletter. So I was really interested there about your drone and being able to survey, because I'm not sure if it's the same in England and Wales, but in Scotland we've got a thing where local authorities go out. They'll pick areas. They've got, I think from memory, it's that 5 different categories about how clean an area is meant to be, and they'll go out and literally walk the streets and categorize them in terms of how clean or how dirty they are. And that tends to be done like a neighbouring authority will check the neighbour's authority. But to a certain extent, it's a bit like, they're marking their own homework. They're not going to give the neighbour a bad result because the neighbour might give them a bad result. And there's a bit of a feeling within some in the waste sector, the people that are probably told they're just moaning about it, that we're not actually really, we're the streets are getting dirtier, they're getting less clean, there's more litter, and we're not actually acknowledging that in these reports, and we're not actually doing anything about it. So it'd be really good to be able to get, contract, somebody independent to fly over in an area and actually properly assess the, how dirty or how clean an area is. I think it really, help drive change in terms of where improvements need to be made. Because I think a lot of the councils really struggle with getting budget for street cleansing effectively. And that's the big challenge. And you probably know there's loads of research, and you let an area go downhill in terms of litter and fly tipping and all that, the rest, and then it encourages vandalism, and it just ends up being this bit of a downward spiral. So it's really interesting that technology is now out there.
It really is, and so we did In the Loop in Edinburgh, but it was before we were working with Ellipsis, and they haven't been involved in much of the In the Loop stuff. But local authorities just don't have a budget for this, and this is why we're often helping now to give them funding to make it happen, because they're keen to do it. And you'll speak to the people in their waste teams who are like often very dedicated and want to make a difference. They just don't have the resources to do so. So we're trying to help divert some private sector resources back into the public sector to improve the street scene and help people to care about their local environments more too.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Right, I've gone totally off tangent in terms of the question list. So I'll pass it. So well done, Alex, for answering these unprompted questions. I'll pass you back to Alicia.
So Alex, in terms of your own habits outside the work, would you say that through coming into this organisation, the kind of environmental and sustainability side of things, would you say it's made you change your kind of morals and your habits? And would you say you try and live up to a certain way, or do you try and influence people around you, like friends and family, in terms of recycling, waste management?
I mean, yes, I already cared, but I was just so much less knowledgeable.
Yeah.
I think it's changed a lot. I mean, I'm sure like you, anyone in this sector becomes like a massive recycling nerd and thinks about every piece of packaging that passes through their hands. And then I think going sort of up a step, I also look much more critically at material choices when I see an item. Like, why does this thing have 3 different types of like material that can't be separated on it? That's a disaster. And that will make me buy differently as a result, because I won't want to buy just an example from yesterday. I don't want to buy a greetings card that has a button, glitter, plastic, all these like 5 materials on one thing. And you're like, this is absolutely crazy. So there's definitely that. I think buying less in general, and looking for more like reusable solutions all of the time, starting to rent things when I can. So I've definitely become more thoughtful about that, more mindful. You just see waste. You see waste everywhere, and I'm someone, again, like lots of us, brought up that wasting food was a terrible thing to do. I still wasted loads of food, and I'm much more thoughtful and skilled also at that and reducing that. There's one thing to know it's bad. It's another thing to have the tools to do something about it. So yeah, reducing food waste in the home, I think, has probably been a big one as well. There's so much.
Yeah, and obviously through your work, you're giving people the knowledge and how they can make those small changes. I've been looking at your recent campaign.
Secondhand
Santa.
Yeah.
It's excellent. So it is. It's a really good idea, and that's great. That's something that people can introduce into their workplace, and it just through introducing things like that, you can just really minimise waste and change people's kind of views, and it's exciting and it's fun and it's new again, and it gives people a bit of a challenge, and yeah, it's really good. It's useful.
Absolutely, and I guess for your listeners who don't know what it is, Secondhand Santa is an attempt to shift Secret Santa, which we do in our offices often without thinking, into only giving pre-loved secondhand gifts or things that we've made, to reduce the waste, because our research showed that basically very few people actually liked the things they were given in Secret Santa, and a lot of them didn't even make it home from the party. So we're just creating a vast amount of waste. And so to do Secondhand Santa not only will reduce waste at Christmas, but it's a great way of getting people to rethink their habits at a really wasteful time of year in a way that doesn't feel like it's telling you off or telling you not to do something. You can still have your fun Christmas Secret Santa. You just put a twist on it.
I'm allowed to confess that I've been given secondhand goods and Secret Santas for years.
That's good. You're a pioneer.
There we go. So busy life, Alex. How do you get away from it? How do you relax? Is music still a big thing, or?
Yeah, I mean, music is a big thing. I mean, I've always been collecting records, and I still do. I still do that. I had to explain to my daughter yesterday why a record arrived in the post, and I was like, yeah, one more. I'm gonna have thousands of records. So, so yeah, music is still big, and actually, I've started making music again for the first time in about 25 years recently. So that's become my kind of getting away from it all. I mean, for me, it's probably three pretty standard things: music, books, and football would be the classic triumvirate. I'm a long-suffering Nottingham Forest fan, and spend my time worrying about that. And
I was going to ask which team you support.
Yeah. No, it's relatively happy days for us. And then I've got 3 small kids, so there's plenty that pull me away from work when I need to.
Yeah, so no challenge to get away from it. You mentioned they're making music. What do you mean? Is that recording people or
no? It's
stuff yourself?
So I'm just making beats on my iPad, sampling my own record collection, and just making little things. I mean, I shouldn't be talking about it in public. I'm not intending on releasing any of this stuff. But it's
we need to hear one of them. We can add one to the end of the podcast if you wish. There's no pressure.
I'll make you a theme tune. Yeah. No, it's for my ears only.
We already had, was it Sheila Best last podcast?
Yeah, that's actually 2 offers for theme tunes.
She was.
I think this needs to happen.
I think you should take Sheila's would be my recommendation.
Yeah, she was a drummer, so we're kidding around. Okay. She could do us a new drumming jingle for the podcast. So
nice.
So there you go. And what's next for you in your career? You got big plans for Hubbub?
Yeah, I mean, I'm focused on building Hubbub and making us the most impactful organization that we can be over the next few years. So we've got a lot of amazing stuff lined up for next year around some of the areas that we're really focused on, which I mentioned a couple of them already. We're also working on responsible fashion projects, which I think will be really interesting. We do a lot of work around connecting with nature, so urban greening projects, but how we as people interact with those and the impact they have on us and our environmental behaviours. I've got some really exciting projects lined up for that, and we're doing so much interesting work around e-waste as well, which I might talk about in a little bit. But particularly working with Gen Z on how to shift behaviours around electronic waste. So I think there's going to be an exciting time for that as well. So there's lots to be doing at Hubbub for sure.
Lots to get done. Out of interest, how big a team are you?
We're coming on for 60 people. Yeah, so we're like medium size.
It's big enough.
Yeah, big enough.
Okay.
Yeah.
Alex, I don't know if you'll have an answer to this. It's a bit of a hard one to sometimes think of on the spot. But is there one fact that you would like to share about your job or your industry that you don't think people will know? Something that people might not be familiar with, or something unusual, or?
Yeah. I might give you 2 if that's all right.
Yeah, that's fine. Absolutely.
Go for it.
So one of them, I think, thinking around this, COP is happening this week as we record this podcast, and there's a lot of conversation in our industry around climate change and what the role of citizens is, like individuals. Some people make it all about individuals and their carbon footprint, and other people say, well, it's all down to systems change and governments and so on. There was a report last year from the House of Lords Environment and Climate Change Committee, which showed that a third of the emissions reductions that we need to make in the UK by 2035 to hit net zero depend on the decisions that we make as individuals and households. And I'm not in the camp of saying this is all individuals' responsibility. It's absolutely not. But I also think it's really dangerous that we can feel like disempowered, that there's nothing we can do. And the things that we can do, the choices we make in our homes, the way we vote, of course, what we buy, all of these things in the aggregate makes a huge difference. But it also creates the environment in which politicians make their decisions and creates the pressure or the encouragement for them to do the right thing. And it's what we're really focused on at Hubbub, is like, how do we make the mainstream society, how do we make that create a sense for the decision makers with real power that they should do the right thing, that they should make the environmentally friendly choices because they know that the public cares, the public will back them. So I think that's a really important one. And then just as a bonus, because it always blows my mind coming back to e-waste, is that there's more gold in a ton of smartphones than in a ton of gold ore. It's mind-bending. So I
didn't
like
know
that one.
There's a similar. I think there's a similar one with there's more precious metals come into the country via, electronic goods than there is in jewellery. So there's much more.
I'm not surprised. Yeah.
No, it's interesting. You mentioned there the behaviour change thing. That occasionally get involved in conversations where people are, climate change isn't a thing. It's not happening. It's just a reason to put up taxes and charges more for energy and so on. And you have that conversation with people, and quite often what I say to them is, okay, you might not believe climate change is happening. That's your choice to do that. But do you actually really think we're actually taking care of our environment? Are we looking after our waste? Are we looking after our use of energy? Are we looking after our use of water? Are we providing sustainability and, good habitats? And the answer to that is, in general, no. And is that what we want to pass on to future generations? So I think sometimes taking it away from the climate change thing is probably quite good, and widening it out to the bigger picture of, are we looking after the environment and society properly for future generations?
I think that's really important. And the way we think about it is that if you want to reach new people, you have to paint a positive picture, because negative campaigning and doom mongering, while it has its place, it isn't the answer for converting huge swathes of society. So you've got to paint a picture of, well, if we make these changes, even if you don't believe in perhaps the man-made climate change, although that is a smaller proportion of people, then we'll paint a picture of a healthier, cleaner, greener world. Often in which people would have cheaper bills and warmer homes, and I think that's the vision we should be selling people. Not we need to club together to defeat climate change. We've got to paint the picture of where we're going together.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Any habits or changes you think you could tell the public to help them do this, how they manage their waste or how they improve their overall sustainability, that you maybe think they're not aware of?
Well, I think awareness of electronics in general is so important, and it's low among the public. Anything with a plug and a battery, or plug or a battery, should be treated as electronic waste. That's practically everything nowadays. There's so much around us now has a chip in it. So people should recognize what they have that is electronic waste in the first place, which are a wide variety of things, from their kids' toys to gadgets, all sorts of bits and bobs. Collect it up. Look for your local collection spot. Go on recycleyourelectricals.co.uk and look up your local collection spot, or your council might collect it if you book a electricals collection. And just also think before you buy something that is like needlessly electronic. Do you need a baseball cap with a light in it? These sorts of things that are just all around us now. We're on track next year to produce the most electronic waste per capita in Europe. I think Norway have the crown at the moment, the unwelcome crown, but we're on track to take it off them. And awareness is really low. And one of the other things that we've seen is that people hoard electronics they think has a value, and particularly smartphones. They think they need a spare, although people almost never use it. Those smartphones can go to a good home. So we run a project with Virgin Media O2 called Community Calling, where we will take the millions of, well, not millions, we're not at millions yet, but there are millions of smartphones in people's drawers and cupboards. We will refurbish it, wipe the data with a trusted partner, and then give it to someone who's digitally isolated, who doesn't have access to the internet, who doesn't have a device. Give them free data, some training. They could then use that to stay in touch with their family, apply for jobs, all kinds of things. So you can make a real difference with those electronics that perhaps you're not using. And if that is you listening to this, then I would recommend looking up our community calling campaign and send us your old smartphone, and we'll put it to really meaningful use.
We had an office collection day just recently. In fact, it was for World E-Waste Day or whatever it was called. So we arranged with our local contractor, our recycling contractor, CCL North, and they provided us bins and so on. And a lot of the stuff was phones, Alicia, wasn't it? It was
so many phones. I think we had from our office, how many staff have we got, Alistair? 11 in the office
11,
usually?
12. Yep.
I think there was about 30 smartphones.
Yeah.
Just shows the amount.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is amazing. Yeah.
And I'm still finding a few I've got at the house as well that I never brought in.
Yeah, it was a lot of e-waste from a small office. It was a lot.
We did actually just a little plug as well. We did interview Scott Butler from Material Focus on episode 15, and his podcast and his organisation is very, very much focused on waste electrical and electronic equipment. So if any listeners haven't listened to that one and you're interested in the wee waste, then his is certainly worth a listen. So here we go. So a bit of industry jargon or an acronym that you either like or loathe.
So actually, I did a little poll in the office for this yesterday.
I like that. I liked the one earlier on. You mentioned, actually, I can't actually remember what it was. You mentioned one, and then I did actually explain it.
FMCG, fast moving consumer
That's
goods.
the one.
Yeah. So the likes of Unilever and so on, who sell shampoo and things like that. So the winner yesterday, there was a few came up, but the winner yesterday was Dirty Murph.
And everybody thinks it's spelled MURS.
yeah, or MURPH, like it's a name.
And you want to explain what that is?
Sure. So it's a waste facility that receives unseparated rubbish, like black bag waste, basically, whether it's from homes or from commercial businesses.
Perfect.
I didn't know that one.
Yeah, so you get a clean MRF and a dirty MRF. So in terms of difference, Alicia, it would be a dry mixed recyclate from a household, for example, that would in theory go to a clean MRF because in theory it's not got sort of residual waste. Whereas if you're trying to recycle the residual waste, that would be viewed as a dirty MRF.
Okay.
At the end of the day, it's down to the waste stream coming in, but it's also the products you get out. The recyclate you would get out of a dirty MRF is probably lower quality and therefore less value. So that's the sort of difference. And then we're going to give you a magic wand to sort out the world of waste management and sustainability, Alex. How would you like to use it?
I polled this in the office as well, and I had so many different. I had so many different answers, and I thought I would try to go for one that perhaps you hadn't had before.
Okay.
So I would like to see legislation for a right to repair, because I think we should all have the right to fix the products that we own. And a right to repair would change regulations on how things are made, would help to make them easy and also affordable to repair, and give us better consumer rights in the first place. And we've seen things that often heading in the wrong direction, that items we have are getting harder to repair, and as a result, or partly a result, e-waste is growing as a waste stream. And I think what I love about the right to repair movement is that you get a huge waste reduction. You would also shift resources, jobs and industry into more circular parts of the industry. So you create jobs in repair, for example. You'd have designers thinking about circularity at the moment of design. You'd be giving more power to citizens to look after the things that they own and think about them as things that they're going to own for a long time, and not just, cheap thing until it breaks. And in doing that, and by empowering people, by helping them to fix things, then you're also creating a culture shift in the way we think about the stuff that fills our lives. And so, thinking about it with my Hubbub hat on, something that has a massive impact in terms of waste and helps to shift the culture around the things we own, the things we come into contact with every day. That's incredibly powerful and part of the change we need to see. So yeah, I'm going to go for the right to repair laws.
I like that one.
Yeah, I like that too.
And just by absolute pure chance, Alex, and this is I'm not making this up. Before we came on this podcast, there was a LinkedIn post that there's actually an organization. So you can review goods like Amazon, you would review goods, but there's nothing out there to review goods maybe 3 or 4 years down the line. But seemingly there is. So so Scott Butler, I'm just checking here, I'll find it and share it. So Scott Butler reshared this. So there's this website where you can evaluate goods 3 or 4 years later. And what's quite interesting is what they were saying was, say they were comparing like earpods or whatever, between Bosch and Sony or whatever. So this person that was reporting, they say, I would probably have gone for the Bosch ones. But then when I look at the reviews from 3 years later, the Sony ones are better because they're easier to repair, they're easier to fix, and so on. So really interesting that, if we could have some way of working out, because a number of times you buy things and, they're great for a week and then they fall to bits. And, if you had that information about, as well as the product when you buy it, how long it's going to last for, it'd be really interesting. So no, I like that one.
That's great. I didn't know about that.
I'm going to read it properly. I've only literally skimmed through it, and just when you mentioned that, I thought that's really fascinating. So perfect.
Yeah, that is interesting. So very last question we have for you, Alex, is do you have any advice for anyone wanting to follow in a similar career path to you, and how would you advise them to get involved, or where to look, or any kind of advice around that area?
Anyone who wants to follow in a similar career path to me has got a slightly strange mindset, because it's my career path is pretty unusual, I think. But I think I often get asked about how to make a career change, because I made quite a radical one, and there are, on purpose is fantastic if you can get onto that, and if you're in London or Paris or Berlin where they do it, which of course not everyone is, there are other tools out there to help you make a change. There's a website called Career Shifters, which offers a lot of advice, but also has some courses that can help people that I've heard of, effective as well. And I think it's really important to try and step back away from the sector knowledge you have and think about the skills that you have that could be applied in other sectors, and then work on trying to make a compelling case for how they could be useful to someone else. It's so easy for me to say. It could be really hard when you're trying to make a career change. But you need to find ways of thinking, well, what are your transferable skills, and then find someone who needs what you've got, even if that means taking a step backwards to take 2 forwards.
Yeah, that's good advice, and it's good that you incorporated the change into it as well, because as you say, your career change was pretty huge. It's two totally different industries, so that could be useful for people who maybe don't start off in the waste industry or the sustainability industry, and they decide that they want to make that change and get into it. It's good to hear it from a kind of different perspective of someone who hasn't started off in that industry.
Brilliant. Brilliant, thank you. Well, that's us exhausted our extensive list of questions for you, Alex, including all the random ones I was throwing in at you. So thank you very much. It's been fascinating to talk to you, and good luck with Hubbub and all your campaigns. We will share them when we see them as well. So we do as Albion, I'll quite often share them. So we will try and extend your reach as much as we can.
Yeah, and we discussed them on the podcast too quite a lot.
Good. Well, thank you, and thank you for having me.
Perfect.
No problem. Thank you very much for coming on.